Welcome to the deep dive. We're plunging right into the really intense details emerging from the news cycle, trying to pull out what matters most for you. Today, it's day 24 of the Sean Diddy Combs federal sex trafficking trial. And this isn't just about, the flashy headlines. We're going deep into the specifics, the digital evidence, the courtroom tactics, and honestly, some pretty wild jury drama. Our mission here is to unpack how prosecutors are building this racketeering case using digital receipts, as they call them, and also how Diddy's defense is fighting back hard. All this happened with a jury situation that kind of became its own story.
Exactly. After weeks of testimony that was often really raw, very emotional from the alleged accusers, day 24 felt like a real pivot. The whole atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. It went from those intense personal stories to something much more calm, almost clinical, really. An examination of facts. We're talking hard evidence now, pulled straight from internal records, staff communications, laid out in text messages, detailed charts. It felt like the prosecution wanted to step back from the emotion and just build a factual base.
And quite a base they aimed for. Diddy himself, he walked in wearing a pale blue sweater. Looked surprisingly calm, actually. Before he sat down, he did the heart-shaped thing with his hands to the gallery, mouthed, "I love you." Standard stuff, maybe? But there was also this buzz, right, about Kanye West being on the family list for the day. Though, yeah, he didn't show up.
Right. Predictable, maybe. Makes you wonder about the PR side of things.
Totally.
But once things got started, yeah, the mood changed fast. Prosecutors just launched straight into this day, focused completely on these digital receipts. It was witness after witness, but not accusers this time. Government people, paralegals, agents, delivering testimony that was just methodical, dispassionate, just laying out text, charts, records, no fireworks, just facts. That seemed to be the goal.
But before they even got deep into the evidence, the morning kicked off with some major drama, didn't it? With the jury. Tell us about juror #6 being dismissed.
Oh, yeah. It was quite something. Right at the start. Juror #6, he's a 41-year-old black man, works as a head of communications clerk, lived up in the Bronx with his fiancée, baby daughter, apparently got his news from the New York Post, listened to 90s hip-hop, that sort of profile. Anyway, he got removed. The judge basically said he believed the juror had shaded his answers during voir dire, the selection process, about where he really lived. Turns out he was apparently sleeping and living part-time with his girlfriend in New Jersey, even though he'd claimed the Bronx was his main residence.
Wow. So the judge thought he wasn't being truthful about where he lived.
That's the finding. And the key thing here wasn't just, trying to get out of jury duty, which happens all the time. The judge seemed concerned he might have misled them to get on the jury and stay on, which suggests potentially an agenda.
An agenda? That sounds worrying. Like, what kind of agenda could someone have for wanting to be on this jury specifically?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It raises serious flags. Could be bias, could be some other motive. But the implication is he didn't end up there randomly. He might have actively tried to get there, potentially compromising the fairness of the trial right from the start.
And Diddy's team, they weren't happy about this dismissal at all, I gather.
Not at all. They apparently erupted with objections. Their main argument was that removing this juror, who was black, would seriously compromise the diversity of the panel. And, given the context of the trial, that's a significant point.
So a clash between diversity and integrity.
Essentially, yes. But Judge Supermanian, he stood firm. He acknowledged diversity as important, even quoted Diddy's own lawyer on it. But he made it clear that integrity comes first. He used that phrase, "You cannot put the genie back in the bottle," meaning once trust is broken, the damage is done. Integrity trumped diversity in this specific instance.
Okay, so juror #6 is out. Who replaced him?
The first alternate stepped in immediately, a 57-year-old white accountant. And the reporting said Diddy looked visibly disappointed, looked down, and kind of just shook his head.
And the weirdness didn't stop there, right? I read something about a text message.
Yeah, truly bizarre. TMZ reported later that the new juror #6 got this suspicious text from a number they didn't recognize. All it said was, "Are you juror number 6?"
Whoa! Implying it was from the guy who just got kicked off.
That's the implication. Just adds another layer of strangeness to the whole morning.
Okay, so after all that jury chaos, the court finally turns to the main event, the prosecution's digital evidence. You said this is where things got dirty.
Yeah, that's a fair description. The government then played 2 freak-off videos for the jury. One was 11 minutes long, the other a really lengthy 40 minutes. So almost an hour, 51 minutes total of explicit material.
Wow. And who saw these? Not the whole courtroom.
No. Crucially, they were shown only to the jury, the judge, and the main lawyers, not the public gallery, which was done, to avoid re-victimizing people who might be depicted or involved. Sensible measure. But the jurors' reactions were apparently quite stark. One female juror was described as horrified, looking away, even covering her eyes at points, clearly distressed. The male jurors, though, reports said they did not move, just kept their eyes locked on the screen.
Intense. And people could hear things.
Well, the jurors had headphones, but apparently the volume was high enough that sounds described as moaning and groaning kind of bled out to the gallery, like sex tapes playing from a loud setting. Must have been incredibly uncomfortable.
Yikes. Okay, so after that intense viewing, the prosecution brings in their first summary witness, Anana Sankar, a paralegal. What's her role here?
Right. Anana Sankar, a paralegal for the Southern District of New York. Her job wasn't really to introduce new bombshells, but more to organize the narrative, to help the jury connect the dots from all the evidence they had already heard and were about to see more of. She did this using two big charts, summarizing information pulled mainly from phones.
Okay, what was on the first chart? This was from KK's phone, Christina Coram, Diddy's chief of staff.
Exactly. Chart 1 from KK's phone. It covered a lot of ground. There were messages about drugs, specifically marijuana, but referred to with code words like flower, mentioned a dealer named Guido linked to Diddy's circle, then messages explicitly about money for hotels and freak-offs, a group text with Diddy, KK, Fahim, Robin mentioning $5,000 to Brendan for hotel, and then really disturbing text between Cassie and KK, stuff hinting at violence. Cassie wrote, "No one deserves being dragged by the hair. I locked the door for my safety, and I can't do the violent scary anymore." And KK's response, just, "I'll call him in the morning." Chilling.
Wow, that's stark. Anything else on that first chart?
Yeah, also text related to another accuser, Jane Doe, supporting the claims of abuse and financial control, like one from KK to Diddy saying, "FYI, Robin said that she paid Jane's rent last week." It really painted a picture, using their own words, of this alleged system of control, money, drugs, and coercion.
Okay, so that's chart 1. What about the second chart Sankar presented?
The second chart focused on texts involving Diddy, his bodyguard Roger Drock Williams, and Mia, a former personal assistant. And here, the timing was key. It showed Drock reaching out to Mia repeatedly, supposedly on Diddy's orders, after Cassie Ventura had filed her lawsuit. Even though Diddy wasn't texting Mia directly in those specific messages, the prosecution used it to argue that this stuff was all happening under Diddy's watch.
So they're saying Drock was acting as an agent, essentially, even without explicit text from Diddy in that chain.
Precisely. It bolsters their whole enterprise theory. The argument is the network bad boy, the staff was used to carry out these actions, making Diddy responsible even if he didn't send every single text himself. It's about establishing that pattern of racketeering activity.
Was there one text message today that really stood out as, like, a potential smoking gun for the prosecution?
Absolutely. Probably the most explosive single text shown was from Diddy to KK, back on November 24th, 2022. Diddy asks KK what his head of security needs for a flight to Miami. And Diddy replies, quote, 15 pills of Molly.
Whoa. Directly asking for Molly.
Directly. And then almost immediately a follow-up text from Diddy. Ready? Don't text about it.
Text about it?
Yeah. I mean, for the prosecution, this is gold. It's not just an allegation anymore. It's a direct digital receipt, as they keep saying. It links Diddy himself directly to asking for illegal drugs. This gives them a concrete predicate act needed for that overarching racketeering charge. It feels like a linchpin moment for their case.
And didn't they also play a phone call between Diddy and Jane Doe?
They did, a taped call. And in it, Jane tells Diddy, referring to Cassie Ventura's lawsuit allegations, that they were, quote, word her experience too.
So corroborating Cassie's story, essentially, in a recorded call with Diddy himself.
Exactly. It just adds another layer, suggesting a pattern of behavior alleged by multiple women.
Okay, so the prosecution lays out all this digital evidence. Then it's the defense's turn to respond, right?
Right.
To try and spin this differently using their own texts.
Yep, absolutely. Diddy's lawyer immediately directed the jury back to some of those texts, trying to reframe them. They focused on that text Diddy sent to Mia, the former assistant, back in February 2024. Remember, this was after Cassie's lawsuit. He texted, "Hey, I don't want to be blowing up your phone. Just need to talk to you for 10 minutes. Just need my memory jogged on some things. You were my right hand for years. But if you don't want to, all good. Just let me know, love."
The defense got the witness, Sankar, to confirm Diddy didn't try calling or texting again after that. Their spin. See, it was just an innocent check-in asking for help with his memory. No harassment, no pressure.
But the timing is still suspicious, right? Reaching out after she was fired and after the lawsuit dropped.
That's the prosecution's counter, for sure. It really cuts both ways, innocuous or intimidating. Depends entirely on how the jury reads it. What else did the defense highlight? I heard something about a text from Jane.
Right. They showed a text from Jane Doe to KK that just read, quote, "I'm excited to surprise him."
I'm excited. How does the defense use that?
Their goal there seems to be muddying the waters around Jane's testimony. If she testified she only participated due to fear or coercion, this text suggests maybe willing participation sometimes, or at least enthusiasm. It introduces ambiguity. Was she always scared, or was the relationship more complex? It complicates her narrative.
Okay, trying to chip away at the victim narrative. Did they have more on Jane?
Yes, another key text from Jane to KK. In this one, Jane clearly refuses something Diddy wanted. She wrote, "My answer to him is no, and it is still no."
Ah, so showing she could say no.
Exactly. The defense jumped on this. See? She had agency over her own choices. She had the right to refuse him. It directly counters the idea of total control, suggesting Jane wasn't powerless, that she could and did push back sometimes. It paints a picture of perhaps a more typical, albeit maybe dysfunctional, relationship dynamic rather than pure coercion.
Interesting strategy. And then there's that text from KK to Diddy. Sounded pretty intense.
Yeah, that was a fascinating one. The defense showed a message from KK, his own chief of staff, expressing serious frustration with Diddy. She texted him, quote, "If you cannot be honest with me, this doesn't work. We all know what your kryptonite is, and where you don't make the best choices. That will break me."
Wow. So even his inner circle was pushing back. What's the defense trying to achieve by showing internal conflict like that?
It's a clever move, actually. It suggests that Diddy wasn't this untouchable figure who everyone blindly obeyed out of fear. If his own chief of staff felt comfortable calling him out, maybe others, including girlfriends, also had more agency than the prosecution suggests. It implies dissent was possible. It tries to portray him less as a racketeering kingpin and more as, maybe a difficult boss with kryptonite, whose staff and partners weren't just puppets.
Okay, so after that back and forth with the text, the government calls another witness from their team, Special Agent Delisa Penland.
Right, Special Agent Penland. And like Sankar, her role was described as pretty clinical, not about emotional testimony, but about methodically laying out the logistics. Travel records, emails, receipts, connecting the dots of the alleged enterprise.
So getting into the nitty-gritty of how these things were allegedly arranged.
Exactly. She went into incredible detail, talked about a specific trip to London in December 2009, showed messages between Diddy and a travel planner, an email from Diddy telling his office to book a flight for some unnamed man. The itineraries found in Combs Global Records, that's Diddy's company, and flights and hotel rooms for Cassie Ventura and this guy named Jules were paid for by Diddy's American Express.
So linking his business, his staff, and his money to facilitating these trips.
Precisely. Then she moved to October 2012, showed an invoice for Cassie flying from LA to New York, and it was directly billed to Bad Boy Entertainment, his company again. Then, October 13th, 2012, texts between Diddy and Cassie, followed by Cassie texting two other men, giving them hotel room details. She used an alias, Janet Clark, paid cash, and a second room booked under Frank Black, known to be a Diddy alias, paid with Amex and cash.
So multiple aliases, cash payments, company resources. It paints a picture of trying to cover tracks.
That's certainly the implication the prosecution wants the jury to draw. And then Penland testified that the very next day, October 14th, videos were recovered from Cassie's phone that seemed to match up with all those messages and hotel arrangements.
Tying the digital communication directly to physical events and locations.
Exactly. She also brought up that Christmas freak-off text from Diddy to Cassie in early 2013, and she detailed a whole text thread involving 4 men for another alleged freak-off, showing the scheduling, the coordination, the planning involved. She even showed texts from Cassie to male escorts back in 2012. One example was, "Casual, yes, no oil, thanks." And the reply, "Oh, okay, I'll see you at 3 a.m.
Just laying out the mechanics of it all.
Yes. The whole point was to show this wasn't random. It was planned.
So, summing up Agent Penland's testimony and the prosecution's argument here, they're saying there was extensive planning using Sean Cohn's staff and his resources to pay for and to transport escorts for the purpose of prostitution. That's their core claim, right?
That's the core claim. They argue it fits the definition of sex trafficking and racketeering. They're hammering home the idea that these freak-offs weren't just, casual consensual encounters. They were part of a system involving money, power, company resources, logistics, and, they allege, fear. People doing what the boss told them to do.
Okay, we've covered the detailed evidence presented. Stepping back a bit, what's the bigger legal picture here? How might someone like Judge Ashley Wilcott, who analyzes these things, see the prosecution's strategy, especially ending their evidence presentation with those really graphic videos?
Yeah, that's a great point. Judge Wilcott noted that saving the most impactful evidence, those explicit videos for the end, is likely a very deliberate strategy. The idea is to have all the testimony about coordination, payments, texts build up first. Then, bam, you hit the jury with the videos. It's meant to be the final confirmation, the aha moment, making jurors connect everything they've heard to this really visceral evidence. Solidifies the image of a systematic operation right before they rest their case.
Makes sense. Now, what about KK, Christina Carrorum? She seems so central to everything, all those texts. Why wasn't she called by the government? You'd think they'd want her testimony, maybe offer her a deal?
That's the question on a lot of people's minds. The general consensus among legal analysts is that she's likely viewed by the prosecutors as a potential co-conspirator.
Ah, so she might be facing charges herself.
Potentially. Or at least they're keeping that option open. It suggests that if they had offered her a deal she found acceptable immunity, maybe she probably would have taken it and testified for the government. The fact she hasn't suggests either no deal was offered or none she'd accept. The prosecution might see her as too compromised, or perhaps they plan to pursue charges against her separately. It leaves her role hanging, in a way.
Interesting. Okay, so what's coming up next? Who are we expecting to hear from?
Well, the prosecution is expected to call Brendan Paul. He's the alleged drug mule associated with Diddy. And probably one more law enforcement witness to tie things up before they officially rest their case. Then it's the defense's turn. They've listed witnesses like Vashta Dunlap, maybe former HR, Stefan Lindarella, another employee, and, interestingly, a defense paralegal.
A paralegal from their own team. Why?
Usually that's a tactical move to introduce exhibits or summarize evidence without needing an outside expert, potentially controlling the narrative more tightly.
Gotcha. And one quick observation. Diddy's sons weren't in court today, right? Despite being pretty consistent usually.
Yeah, that was noted. They've shown a lot of public support, those Father's Day posts and whatnot, and usually they're there. Their absence today was noticeable, though maybe just a one-off.
Okay, so the trial is definitely moving quickly towards the defense presenting their full case.
It really is. Things are speeding up.
So day 24 was a lot. Intense digital evidence, those really disturbing videos, the unexpected jury dismissal drama, and these clashing narratives built from text messages. It really peels back the layers on how these complex cases are constructed.
Absolutely. And it leaves you, the listener, with a pretty heavy question to consider, doesn't it? You've heard about the digital receipts, the logistics, the planning. How do you weigh that against the defense's points about agency, about consent, about maybe just a flawed boss, not a criminal mastermind? What does this whole situation reveal about power, influence, and responsibility inside these huge entertainment empires? It's complex stuff. And hey, if you find this kind of deep dive, this level of analysis compelling, you might really enjoy what we do over on our YouTube channel. It's called Viral Secrets. We get into visual breakdowns and more discussion there. We'd love it if you check it out and subscribe.